a framing of our time together today. We have about an hour and a half together. We're going to talk a little bit about how CityStudio works. We're going to have a chance to hear from all of you and get to know who's in the room with us today. And then we'll have a chance sort of for Q&A, and we'll give you all the information about next steps for how to move forward with CityStudio in the next stage of the process, if that's interesting to you. So just to sort of start, if at any time you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat and we'll try to track those and answer them as we go. And if for any reason you have to hop off and you're afraid you're going to miss anything, we will record the session and then you'll have the chance to catch up with it at another time. So if you get kind of, I don't know, your internet cuts out or something, which sometimes happens in our new world, not to worry, we'll do our best to get this information to you as well. So my name is Misha and I'm the manager of CityStudio London. CityStudio London started in 2019. It's a program that launched in Vancouver in 2011, and London acquired the license in 2019. So this is our second year, our fourth semester currently that we're running. We were a pretty mighty team of one staff in the first year, and in our second year, we now have 3 staff. So I would just invite my colleagues to say hello. Jamie, would you like to say hello?
Hi everyone, good morning. It's great to see all your faces. I'm the projects coordinator. I just joined CityStudio in January. So I help with the project matching during the semesters. You'll be talking to me and we'll scope out projects and we'll get the students all prepared for Hubbub. And I'm sure Misha will talk more about the process. So great to see you all today.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Jacob, and I had an awesome opportunity to work with CityStudio last year, in my final year of the Fanshawe GIS and Urban Planning program. And I've had the privilege to work alongside Jamie and Misha for the last 6-7 months or so as a research intern, working on all kinds of various things. So great to meet all of you this morning. No problem.
Okay. Yeah, and Jacob and I are sitting in the same room, so we're just coordinating our audio here to master our system. So I think one of the things that's really neat to flag about the team, my background is in architecture and economics, and Jamie's background is architecture, urban planning. Jacob's background is in urban planning. Jacob has a neat background because he was also a CityStudio alumni, and so he's been inside the program and experienced it from a few different angles. Jamie also has expertise in a similar type of experiential learning and city building projects in Montreal. So we have some really neat expertise there. Yeah, myself, I am from London. I grew up here and spent 15 years away, living and working in 7 different countries. And I managed to come back about 3 years ago. I worked on very diverse projects. I worked with the UN on the Creative Cities Network out of UNESCO. I worked one summer in Iceland with NASA doing some interplanetary geology research, digging holes and trying to figure out where different volcanoes had erupted at different times. I studied at the London School of Economics, looking at contemporary urbanism. And then as the global economic crash was happening in 2008, 2009, I ended up working on developing Britney Spears' social media strategy, which was kind of an unusual project at that time. Social media strategy wasn't really a thing. And shortly after that, I was recruited to be the lead project manager building Google's office in Paris for about 5 years. So again, sort of on the inside of a big global kind of multinational with a lot of research in urban design and city building, city planning. Obviously that's a corporate perspective and a profit perspective. But throughout that, I learned quite a bit in all these different experiences. And ultimately I was really passionate and curious about how I might have perhaps more significant change by committing to a location and really planting roots and dedicating myself to one community. So sort of thinking globally, but acting locally. And when I came back to London, I was so excited to find CityStudio was happening in London. It's just been a place where I've been able to apply so many of the things that I've learned. I see so much potential here. It's very exciting that London has about 60,000 students. We have a huge pool of talent in the city, and being able to sort of utilize that talent and direct the focus of that talent towards building the future of our city is really inspiring to me. So that speaks to some of kind of the theory of change of CityStudio. So I will just share my screen and we'll navigate through the CityStudio website so that you can see most of the things that I will mention you can find there as well. So if you want to go back and revisit anything or you forget something that I've mentioned, let's see here, I've got to move this. Oh, that's our org chart. Okay. Actually, I may just show you this first. So CityStudio is, one sec here. Does it present? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we, as the model, it's based on a partnership between the City of London and then post-secondary institutions. In London, we have 5 post-secondary institutions. And so we very ambitiously launched as a partnership between these 6 institutions, and we operate out of Pillar Nonprofit Network. And so Pillar Nonprofit Network is a network of nonprofit and social enterprise across Southwestern Ontario. And each of our partnering organizations were part of founding CityStudio and are an active part of the governance of CityStudio. So you can see sort of the pillar structure. We have our executive director. We sit within the learning and development cluster. And then you have the CityStudio program. So you have sort of our staff team here. Our governance structure is that we have an advisory circle that has a lead from each of our partnering institutions, and those are strategic leads, and we meet quarterly. And then we have a working group that meets bi-weekly with, again, an operational lead from each of our partnering institutions. And then we have a communications committee, which has communications leads from each of our partnering institutions, and we meet biannually. So you can see sort of down here, we have Jamie Cudmore, who introduced herself, the project coordinator, and she then coordinates all of the city staff champions as well as the faculty. Oh, I guess, oops, that skipped ahead to a different slide. We have a communications and engagement coordinator, and then Jacob Smith, who introduced himself there, is a research intern who works on lots of different projects. And over on the side here, you can see that we've got some of our kind of main activities. So when we're talking about these projects down here, there are 3 main offerings of CityStudio: the campus courses, and that is when we embed a city project into an existing course that has an existing course code and it has learning objectives and it's already sort of structured out. We currently have 30 of those projects running this year. So we had over 800 students participate in that program this year. Then we have the studio semester, which is currently being developed this year. We're hoping to launch it this year. That is a semester where the students are a cohort of students, about 20 students that are working full-time for 1 semester on a project. So it's a kind of more intense experience for the students in a sort of simulated work environment that's Monday to Friday, 9 to 4. Then we also have applied research projects where we develop more robust research projects around city projects. This has been our first foray into applied research this year with a MyTax grant, and that project is looking at a new Indigenous Child and Family Center that will be opening this summer. We also do run community engaged learning projects directly with CityStudio. So we also have projects where faculty match directly with CityStudio as opposed to the City of London, where we work on projects that are related to CityStudio. So out of that, we've developed some of the application process that I'm going to talk to you about. And we've also worked on social media. If you've noticed on our social media accounts, you see a lot of information about our projects. A lot of that content has actually been developed by students inside of community engaged learning projects themselves. Okay. Now, how do I get up? 1 sec here. There we go. And I'll go back to this one. I was navigating what I can see on my screen. Okay, where's the best spot to put you? So again, we're at citystudiolondon.ca. If you want to follow along here, you can, or if you want to click to other parts of the website that I'm not showing you or whatever, feel free to head over there in parallel. You'll notice that our website is basically developed off of City Studio Vancouver's website. That was sort of the founding member of City Studio. There are about 13 locations globally around the world, and that global network is growing. So there will be new locations added this year that we're excited to learn more about. You would have noticed sort of what I spoke to is that today we're talking about learning about projects and courses that might be interested in partnering with City Studio through City Studio. So part of the process is that we harvest projects from the city staff. These projects come from the strategic plan. So they're projects that city staff are responsible for, but they're not necessarily projects that the council has approved. So they may be ideas that the cities have about, I think it would be really cool to try something, but I don't have the energy or the resources to put forward trying something that I don't know is going to be successful or not. So we do experimental projects. These are outside of the budgetary scope of the city. So we don't have any budgetary commitments to the projects, but the idea is that by doing these experimental projects, we drive innovation in our city by iterating, by experimenting, sometimes by ruling different scenarios out. So we do have feasibility projects where we have learned that some ideas were not feasible. And that was still really beneficial for the city to explore. Sometimes also we have projects that are kind of a part of a project or a kind of a concept the city staff put forward, and we start a project and we work through that project, and then there may be another iteration of that project. So it may come back, the same city staff may come back and want to iterate further on that project. So sometimes they're just a sort of a step in a journey of a potential project type. But all of the projects do come from a connection to the strategic plan. So they're not, because the city staff are all responsible for elements of the strategic plan. So all of their work is tied back to the strategic plan. And we do identify which part of the strategic plan the project is connected to. And so they're not ideas that are put forward from the public. They're ideas that come through city staff. We have worked with other outside community partners on these projects, and usually how that happens is that the city staff bring in those partners into the project. So for example, we have a project right now that's looking at the impact of COVID-19 on homelessness and housing issues in the city, specifically for violence against women community. And so the city staff brought in community partners from the organizations that represent that topic into the classroom to dialogue with the students and be part of the project. But that was really those connections were brought in through the city staff. So the more information we gather about the projects and the courses through our application process, which I'll show you today, we then start to match the projects. So there we're looking for compatibility. Sometimes there's issues around the timing of projects or classes. There's all types of different considerations that we look into as to how we propose the best compatible match for a project and a course. And then we work with the faculty and the city staff on kind of designing that project, scoping the work, defining what the timeline and the deliverables will be of the project, also defining what the different teams in the classroom might focus on, so how to structure the class. And really that's about supporting the faculty in kind of adjusting the course syllabus or the course outline to have the project embedded in the project. And then we launched the project in the classroom. So throughout the class, we ask the city staff to commit to 3 in-class sessions, one at the beginning to introduce the project, one in the middle to check in on the project, and one at the end to have a sort of final presentation. And City Studio participates in those meetings as well. So we sort of facilitate those meetings. So at the beginning of the project, when we're scoping the project, we define when those meetings will happen. We set up the kind of meeting invitations to make sure that everybody has those meetings in their calendar. And we track that process. And then in the class, throughout the class, we track the process of what's going on in the class. How is it going? Are there places where the course is getting stuck or where the project is getting stuck? that might need extra support or just extra resources to move forward in what they're doing. And so we support that process throughout the project. The reason that this graphic comes from Vancouver, they say launch projects in the public. Sometimes there is a public component of the project. For example, we have a number of surveys that are happening in this semester, and those surveys are being communicated publicly through our social media accounts and then through social media accounts that the students have created themselves as well to try to get data for their project so that they can run the next phase of their work and meet their course objectives, so analyze the data. And then at the end of each project, we share the project, and we do that a few different ways. So you will see on our website, I can show you up here, that we post all the past projects. You can search these by the school, you can search them by the sustainable development goal that they're connected to, you can search them by the city service area, and those search and the date, and those search functionality is something that we are constantly developing. Again, we're in our second year. We grew from 1 staff in year 1 to 3 staff in year 2. So we're really in our bootstrapping development phase, so you'll notice lots of little tweaks to the process. But you can see some of our projects here. So we publish the projects online on our website. We also have an event called Hubbub. That's the sort of branded name of the event across all the CityStudio locations. So if you're curious about that name, it's something that we acquired with the brand. And these events happen all around the world. So they're pretty exciting for us to get to tune into as well. And we learn a lot about how to run these events from the shared best practices of other locations. So we did have one in-person event back in December. I was just trying to see where the best spot is to find the video of that. Yeah, probably on our YouTube channel, but I think actually on our main page, we have a little video that you can watch. There's many short videos, but that's just an image of what was happening at Hubbub. We were at City Hall. We had about 150 students show up. We also had the deputy mayor speak and the presidents from all of the partnering schools give remarks. And then students were able to show posters of their work and then dialogue with the public about their projects. So they were talking about sort of their experience. We have some city staff here looking on at a project that the students were explaining. And the intention there when we talk about sharing and scaling the projects is that we hope that perhaps by showing the projects to city staff, that the city staff, other city staff that maybe weren't even involved in the project itself may see an application within their own work that might be relevant. So that might be how we scale the impact of the project. It may be that the press attend the meeting or the event and give voice to the project that way. So in December, we had a group of students interviewed by the CBC about their project. And it may just be that the city staff that was involved is able to bring their leadership and their team to Hubbub to help get buy-in for the project that they've been working on as well. So that's sort of how we scale those projects. So I'm kind of jumping around, but here you can see how we work. You can look at each of the different school pages and the institution pages to get a little bit more information about each school. Those pages again have some placeholder information, and we'll be adding more information to them as we go. But it basically says, how many projects each school has participated in, some of the numbers, and then what are some of the different resources that exist at the schools. On our participate tab, so that's really what we're doing today is we're talking about how do you participate in CityStudio. And maybe before I'll get into that, I'll just show that the events tab is where Hubbub is listed. So you can see this is our event today, the application info session, but here you also have the Hubbub event, and you can click there to get some more information about it, and then also register that way. So that's kind of where the events are. And then you can also see how the projects are promoted on our media page. Here's the different media pieces. So there's the interview, the CBC interview with the students, and some other. We try to get as much media coverage as we can. These are great opportunities for the students to practice communicating their projects and their skills to the public. And we also do coach them on how to do that effectively and to protect themselves in that environment as well. So back to our participate experience. Our intention here is that we have as many matches confirmed as possible by July 1st, so that when students go to register for their courses, they can easily see which CityStudio projects are matched to which courses, so that they may want to apply and register for those courses. And we are finding that students are using this. We do have a lot of repeat student participation, where students are participating in multiple CityStudio projects because they do like the model. And again, students can filter by school. The kind of user experience of this will be updated through the next few months. But just to give you an idea there, we post the information about the course, and we try to put as much information as we can so that the students can go back into their the kind of course calendar to be able to register for the courses. So that's sort of why we're starting this matching process so early, is that we're trying to hit that deadline for the student registration. We do have some participant resources that, again, we're building out there. And I'm not going to speak too much to that right now, but it will probably come up in our Q&A, and I might come back to it. But that's just to say that as a placeholder, we recognize that we have a lot of best practices to share across the network, and we've created sort of the place on the website for where you can find that information. And we're building out more resources all the time. So today we're talking about the application process. We've tried to make this as streamlined as possible. We try to ask for all the kind of relevant information that we would need to be able to create the compatible matches. But I will also frame that if you don't know any information and you're just here because you've heard about CityStudio, you're curious about it, you want to be part of the network, and you want to kind of be in the community, you can also fill out the application and leave things blank, and just write, I want to have a follow-up call. There's a section at the bottom of the survey that says any other information. So anything you need to leave blank, go for it. And then you can just write at the bottom, I want to have a follow-up call. Can you walk me through this? Or I would like to talk further about it. Or sometimes we have chairs of departments or deans that are wanting to learn more and maybe want to have a conversation and don't have a particular course to put forward. So some of the questions that we ask in the application process are things about, for the courses, we will be asking about what semester they're in, approximately how many students, what year the students are in, what department the course is in, what the course code is, what the course description is, if you know that. And then we will be asking about the types of deliverables that you might be able to play with in your course. And so that really comes down to what the learning objectives are of the course. And that is what's typically can be hard about some of these collaborations, is that the city staff don't know what the learning objectives are in the class. And so it's hard for them to scope a project if they don't know what kinds of learning objectives the students have to have. So if we know that the students need to have certain types of learning objectives that could match these different deliverables, that becomes quite important when we're trying to match the projects. And likewise with the city staff, we ask questions about which service area of the city the project would be situated in, what part of the strategic plan it relates to, and also any information about potential deliverables that could be useful. Sometimes the city staff have a very specific deliverable that they are wanting to track towards, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's a pretty open-ended process, and we may shape the project together. So the city staff may be willing to kind of just go through the guidance of the faculty to figure out what might be possible in that class. So sometimes we match based on, obviously the deliverables need to match, and sometimes that is relevant to the area of expertise of the faculty, and sometimes it's not. For example, when we have some of our research methods courses that are focused on creating surveys, it doesn't particularly matter which service area or which part of the city's activities that might relate to. It just depends on if the city staff wants to be working on a survey, if that's what the students need to do inside of the course objectives of the class. So when you're on that page, you can see this application, and I'll just note that Western main campus has an additional application that you'll need to fill out if you're a Western main campus faculty member. If you forget to do that, Kelly Hollingshead, who's the experiential learning or the community engaged learning lead for Western, will follow up with you about that. But otherwise, if you remember to, you can fill it out here too. It's just a link to where it's located on Western's website. I'll maybe, yeah, there are two different applications based on sort of what I had just described to you, what some of the differences are. But to give you a sense of what that looks like in practice, if my computer keeps up with us here. It's asking us to be patient. You guys maybe have it on your screen already so you can see it. But anyhow, this is kind of a straightforward form. We try not to ask any questions that we don't need so that we're being quite mindful of your time. Again, this is the city staff application. So this is what the city staff put forward. We're just looking for your contact information so that we can follow up with you about the projects. You know, what type of information, what's the problem that you're trying to tackle, any description that you have about the project. These don't have to be fixed. They're just an initial spot from where we start from. And throughout the project, we continue to refine what the description of the project is so that when it appears on the website, it hopefully is the sort of end result of what the project became. Here we're asking about those optimal deliverables. Sometimes, you know, you can just select whichever one is appropriate, or you can add a little bit more detail to that if you want. Sometimes, for example, the city staff have already done work with a previous class, either with CityStudio or not. And so sometimes it's useful to just note that, you know, the deliverable is something specific because it's connected to something else. And then here we're getting into the strategic focus area. And basically this survey will just guide you through that process. The city strategic plan has focus areas. These are the focus areas. Then, for example, if we clicked on a focus area, it'll take us into the expected outcome. If we select whichever expected outcome, it'll give us the next, which result we expect. And then finally, which strategy. So there are, you know, couple hundred, I think, lines of the strategy of the city's plan. Again, yeah, as best you can, fill that out is helpful for us. And if you're not sure, don't worry about it. And then again, you can add anything down here. If you're saying, you know, we had somebody who wanted to work on a city staff person from the heritage department who was saying, you know, I want to work on a CityStudio project. I'm not exactly sure about a project in particular. And then I actually this morning was having a conversation with a community partner in London who was saying in the Innovation Works building that Pillar runs, who works in social housing, and she was saying, oh, I would love to do a heritage project with CityStudio. And so my mind went to like, oh yeah, we had that city staff person who wanted to do a heritage project, and maybe there's a way that we can collaborate. So we track all that data. And then we create the matches. So that's the city staff application. As you can see, it's not a super laborious application. We try to make it as simple as possible. And then we will gain more information as we go through the process that we will add to our filing about the project. So this is the academic faculty application. Again, contact information we need just to be able to follow up with you on these pieces, identifying which institution. This is really related to the course. So if you are wanting to put forward multiple projects or multiple courses, ideally you would fill out the application for each project or for each course. Likewise, if you teach across different institutions, it would be helpful for us if you tell us which school the course is that you have in mind or the potential courses that you have in mind. And that's really because our service agreements with the partners is that we have a certain number of matches for each school. So that's part of the matching process too, is that we have to consider what are the priorities of the school in terms of what they're wanting to focus on for matches this year. Sometimes I think we want to sort of have a balance of experienced CityStudio faculty and also new and incoming CityStudio faculty so that we can spread out sort of the knowledge across the institution as well. So again, information about the department, the course name, the course code, an approximate number of students. You usually don't know that. We tweak this as we go. So this is an expected number of students, and then the end result of the students can be whatever it is. But that's just to give us an idea, basically to imagine potentially how many teams there might be in the class. So one of the things I don't think I said sort of explicitly is that CityStudio matches with the entire class. So we sometimes community engaged learning takes 5 teams and matches with 5 community partners. The CityStudio model is where we match with the entire class for the project. And then we divide the teams within the project with the faculty. It's really the faculty who leads that process in whatever way makes sense to the course. So it may be that 5 different teams in the course all are given the same project scope. And then we get 5 different results, and that's an interesting and rich experience for the city staff. Or it may be that we decide to give each team a different focus, and then somehow it comes back together in a useful way. So that's really, we work on that through the scoping and project finalization process. But that's why it's helpful for us to know how many students, so that we can start to imagine how we might break down the scope. We want to know what semester the projects are in. If you know anything about the time of day and information about when the course happens, that's just for our tracking. But again, we will pick that up as we go, any information that you provide throughout the course. And then a course description. Again, this is important for when we're trying to promote your course to students. So when we've matched the project and we put your course on our website saying this is a CityStudio, there's a CityStudio project inside this course, it is useful that we have your course description there. So if you have it, that's great. If it's not ready, we'll be following up with you before July, before we post online for that. And then just the year of study. Typically, we work with upper year students, 3rd, 4th, and graduate. That's just tends to be where the deliverables align and where there's enough flexibility in the course to run the projects when the students are ready to do these kinds of projects. But it's not limited to that, but that's been our experience so far. And then just identifying what kinds of deliverables might be possible within the class. So that is the application process. And then the last thing I wanted to show is at the bottom of each of our page, you can see our social media accounts. So we have an account, we have a Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube account. If you click on our YouTube account, you'll find a bunch of videos there that hopefully are useful. There's a video about what CityStudio is, like a sort of 2-minute video, I think. Let's just see what we've got. And you probably may have seen some of our videos as well on our social media account. So yeah, you can see our launch Hubbub event here, some information about what CityStudio is. This was our application kind of drop in from last year. Here you have some videos of students in projects. We have a video of our digital Hubbub that we did in July last year, or sorry, in April last year, right when we went online. Yeah, just other videos about projects. This is if for any reason your class is running asynchronously. If you have an online class and it's running asynchronously, we also have content that you can show to students, kind of welcome to CityStudio, how it works. We also we had a project that was about anti-racism kind of tools from last year. And we created a number of different pieces of content about that project, including short kind of promotional videos for eventually a student-led roundtable that we did last summer. So we had students from that team for about an hour and a half present their work and then receive questions from the public about their project, and they did a phenomenal job. We also have these 2 videos that were explaining sort of the city staff experience and then the faculty experience of CityStudio, and we'll be adding kind of more videos there. And otherwise, you can see we have different use cases, I would say, and engagement with social media and the different platforms. But I'd say LinkedIn is actually our most active platform. But you can see here that we do kind of put our posts and then those get reshared and there's some engagement around that. So likewise, sometimes it's faculty and city staff sharing about their projects. Sometimes it's students, sometimes it's us, sometimes it's the school sharing about a project that like a King's sharing about the King's project of CityStudio. And I'll just show you on Instagram, or sorry, on LinkedIn. What's been really neat is coaching the students how to leverage LinkedIn for their next steps of their career. So we do provide some coaching around that, especially to the projects that win the event, the judging at Hubbub. I don't know if it will. Internet is slow for me today. Anyhow, the students, because we post the projects, the students often then create content based on the project, based on their project. So they will say, oh, here's my CityStudio project, and they'll directly kind of link to their project. And that's been pretty neat to see kind of the engagement. Jacob was really good at this last year with his project with CityStudio. Yeah, it's not really showing very well. But anyhow, you can poke around on there. We also have lots of dialogue with students where students are reaching out to us to chat with us about our experience or learn more about what's possible or get any advice that they might be curious about. We had some students that were curious about sustainable sort of construction industry. And so we've been coaching them about how to do information interviews and putting them in touch with industry leaders to do so. So those were kind of the backstory that I wanted to share with you to sort of frame this conversation. And then I would like to just sort of open up the space for you to ask your questions and see what we may have missed. So does anybody have any questions coming to mind?
I have one question. I'm wondering, do you just pair up with courses, or do you also pair up with a scientific club, for example, at Western University?
Cool. That's a great question. So we haven't had that request yet, but we're pretty open to different models. So that I think it's still worth putting through an application and just sort of explain kind of how that would work. If you were able to figure out kind of how many students that might implicate and what the workflow might be, like if it would be a weekly meeting or how that might work, that would be useful for us to know.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the question. Anyone else have any questions coming to mind so far?
Hi, Misha. This is Philippe. How are you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you again. So our courses over at King, especially concerning our analytics and decision sciences module, they're usually one-term courses. So from your experience, would it be better to look at any type of project as a two-term type, or one term would suffice?
Yeah, great question. So I would say maybe 30% of our projects this year were full year courses, two-term courses. And the remaining sort of 70% were one semester, one-term course. So it's definitely possible to do one-term projects. There's sort of advantages to each. So I wouldn't think it's not something that we would look to prioritize at this point. So we don't kind of choose full year courses over one semester courses because we haven't found that to be a sort of dramatically different to the outcome of the projects. So yeah, both are possible for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions coming to mind? Okay. Thanks, Ian, for your question. Is it possible to apply as a kind of utility player if you're a staff member and not a faculty? Oh, that's a good question. I think it's definitely possible to apply. So put the application in and then we'll figure that out. This year with COVID, we did have a few, I was thinking of a project at a Huron where the faculty person was actually an operational person from the school who just happened to be running the project inside the class. And we had some pretty amazing results inside the class. And I don't know how that class came to be, but I got the sense that it wasn't a class necessarily that was happening consistently, but it was an operational staff member who was running the class. So I do think that is possible. Thanks for the question, Ian.
Misha, I'm wondering maybe you could talk about Hubbub and how we get students ready for it and what's required, just to have that in mind when making course curriculum.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I think to the point around, how to manage this project inside your class when you're planning your class. We do have some resources for that, to be able to note kind of scheduling in those 3 in-class interventions with the city staff. The city staff usually also provide a bunch of resources that are related to the project, that are relevant to the project. So often that's also incorporated in the course outline, so the students have those, or they may be kind of positioned as required readings at certain points. And then, so towards the end of the semester, the end of the class period, we start getting ready for Hubbub. And so we, Jamie would be working with you to come into the classroom and to help sort of prepare the students for Hubbub. We do talk about Hubbub at all the sessions that we attend. So it's a lot for the students to come in and have all of these extra people in the classroom and to try to track what is going on. So usually it's there's a marketing concept that you have to hear something 7 times before you've actually internalized it. And so we sort of apply that we keep coming and we repeat things, hopefully in an interesting enough way that it's still engaging. And so we sort of prep the students that it's happening, and we have resources online that we point to sort of say you can get a sort of teaser of what that experience would be like. We try to have, so currently the way that Hubbub is working this year online, and it will be going forward as well, just because the number of students that we have, we're not able to have all of the student participants present at Hubbub. So we usually try to have one team from the class, and that can be, the top team if you're able to define it as such, or it could be, a group from across different teams that are wanting to present and be the sort of public facing side of the class. And so the students and the faculty kind of coordinate themselves for deciding how they're going to present the class at Hubbub, whether it's going to be the top team or whether it's going to be a group of representatives from the class. And then we ask that that team of students presents a poster. The poster is meant to be very accessible, graphic kind of poster. It's not an academic poster, and that's sort of intentionally so. A lot of those posters we end up then using in our social media. We're trying to do the knowledge translation piece of how do the students communicate this rich academic research in a way that is really accessible to the public. So we work on a kind of a graphic poster, hopefully with images and big text and really summary of like, here's what we did, here is what we suggest should happen next, kind of thing, like very, very high level. And then we ask the students to put together a 1-minute pitch video that we also include in some of the prep material for Hubbub. And then we can share that on social media, and it really helps prepare the students for what their experience of Hubbub will be, because at Hubbub, they have their own booth with their poster and any other project material that they want to put forward. And then they manage dialogue with whoever comes into their booth. So it may be the senior leadership team from the city that comes into their booth to that's judging the projects to figure out, to award a project for Hubbub as the judge's choice. It may be faculty, it may be city staff, it may be other students that come into booth. It may just be the public that comes into the booth and asks the students about their project. And by them doing the work of preparing the poster and preparing the pitch video, they're very prepared to have these types of, easy elevator conversations. And these skills are critical then for job interviews. And we've had great feedback from students where they say that being able to speak to their project in a job interview has set them apart and has ultimately got them, a job or an internship that they've done. And so it's very intentional in how we're trying to give that opportunity for that skill development there. Anything else, Jamie, I missed that you want to flag? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I had the chat box in my way. I think that was pretty great. I wonder if maybe you can speak to the example of preparing students to speak with the media, if you haven't touched on that already.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so we're mindful that the students are young adults. They're, or not necessarily, but predominantly, let's say, young adults, and that there's some vulnerability in that we want to be mindful of and respectful of. And while we want to get as much platform and opportunity for the students to share about their work as possible, we also really want to protect the students from being taken advantage of in any way. And so we kind of coach the students on how to engage with the press, especially around creating their speaking points and sticking to their speaking points, and not feeling like they have to answer any particular question. We had an experience where the media was kind of leading the students to tell a certain story, and the story wasn't exactly what the students were talking about, and it was more connected to making some assumptions about their personal, them personally, largely based on their aesthetic. And so just helping to coach the students to really understand that the media is there and they have their agenda that they're doing, and you don't necessarily have to go down that agenda. You can have your speaking points and you can respectfully sort of acknowledge, thank you for the question, and then say the speaking point that you need to convey. So again, it's a great skill, great interview skill for job interviews or for any kinds of interviews. But yeah, so we try to really help frame that as much as possible. And also when we're working with the media, we try to also frame that to the media that that's what our expectation is. That by helping facilitate access to the students, our expectation is that they're respectful as well of the vulnerability that the students are in. The other thing I didn't mention is that while we share all of this information and provide all this platform for students, if at any point, and inevitably this will happen, that eventually the students will be at a point in their career where this won't be the quality of work that they want to highlight anymore because they've moved beyond this level of skill. And so we always sort of flag as well to students that at any point they want us to take down their content, to just let us know, and we will do that right away because we understand that they're in a stage of their development. We have had questions about like, is there an ideal number of students for a class for CityStudio project? And it's been interesting that I would say we don't have an ideal number of students. We've had classes that had 4 students, and we've had classes that have 200 students, and everything kind of in between that. And so we're trying to sort of pilot and test different iterations and learn as we go with that. So I don't think there is a limit. It depends on the project. Sometimes certain projects lend themselves more easily to be divided into, we have a project right now that is looking at reducing carbon footprint of residential homes. And so there's 39, it's 200 students in the class, there's 39 teams in the class. And each team is working in a sort of working on a different building essentially. So that was not that difficult to scale that project that way. And that's part of the work that we do, is to scale the projects appropriately to match the class. So we help facilitate fitting the project into the class that we think is going to be the compatible match. So I don't think having a small class is an advantage or having a big class is a disadvantage or advantage, or vice versa. We really work on scaling and scoping the project to match the class that the project will sit in. Any other questions come into mind for anyone? I guess we could speak a little bit about that piece of scoping the teams. So as an architecture student, architecture school is largely project-based, and typically how the projects are organized is that the same scope is given to all the students, and each student or each team of students creates a different design. And that's easy to conceptualize when we think about architecture, because we can imagine how you design a building and each building is going to be subtly different. Sometimes when we're thinking of like reports, that's not as obvious as to why it would be interesting to have a bunch of different sort of research visualizations. But But for example, with some of our urban planning projects, we've looked at, last year there was a project that Jacob was a part of that was looking at a business corridor along Hamilton Road, and each team worked on a different city block. And so each project was different in how the students analyzed the data that they were collecting and working with, but they also were looking at a different location, just slightly different, one block at a time. There was some overlap where we were still able to see comparisons across each location, and there was quite a bit actually, and that was part of the real asset to the city staff, was that the city staff got back all of this really rich data across that whole corridor and divided into these blocks. So that was pretty interesting to see. We've had some other classes where the teams were broken down into almost like if you could imagine a design consulting firm where there's just different operational functions. So you have a sort of a marketing team, and you have a research team, and you have the sort of the design team. And so the class had the team that was looking at reaching out to the public to set up information interviews with key stakeholders. And then you had a team that was doing the literature review and the sort of background research, and another team that was sort of building the assets of the project. So whether those were like a marketing plan or something, or whatever the deliverable is that they're building. So there's a lot of different ways that that you can structure how the teams in the class work. And what we found is that while this model really allows the faculty to be a lot more engaged in the project than perhaps when they're managing 5 different community partners. My own experience, because as a CityStudio kind of lead, we also are community partners on projects with the universities and college. And I find that when I am a community partner in the room or in a class with 5 other community partners, I don't really build a relationship with the faculty. I only get the sort of 5 email addresses of the students that I'm working with, and then I get to know them, but I don't get to know the faculty. And so in CityStudio, the model is really where we keep these kind of roles really clear, that the educator holds the education role of the classroom, and the city staff comes in as sort of the area of the expertise, the technical expertise, because the city staff get to bring a pretty rich expertise into the classroom that otherwise is pretty hard to access through written material, because the city staff can really guide and point to lots of different synergies and overlaps. And so what we have found with the faculty some faculty were a little resistant to this at the beginning, because they were used to working with the normal, what was normal for them of having multiple community partners in the classroom. And with CityStudio, the faculty became really the leader of the project. And the student teams become sort of these different operational parts of how they compose this project, and get to facilitate across the students and really lead and guide the students. So the faculty, I think, built stronger relationships with the students, and also the community partner, the city staff, builds stronger relationships with the faculty, which is kind of where the city staff has availability. The model of CityStudio is really trying to make the experience as streamlined and consistent as possible for the city staff, so that the city staff put forward the maximum number of projects. If the city staff have experiences that are inconsistent and sometimes are good and sometimes are bad, they're less likely to come and engage and put forward projects. And then we don't have as many opportunities for students to participate in these projects. So CityStudio is aiming to really streamline and make consistent the experience of city staff, and hopefully faculty as well. A lot of our faculty that have participated previously, they want to participate again in CityStudio. So there's a value add. I think a lot of it is around the students' experience of Hubbub, and how then the students are able to really translate the theory that they're learning into the practice, and how that creates the very rich experience for the students. And the professors get pretty great feedback from the students around that. So it's I guess that's the point of sort of having this middle facilitation of CityStudio. And that's not to discredit the other community engaged learning that's happening across the city. Obviously, we are only serving a very small number of students and faculty and city staff at this point. We are trying to build a model that's going to be scalable so that we can serve a more substantial percentage of those students. But at this point, we're really only reaching less than 1% of the students in London. So we have a long way to go as well, and we're trying to build a model that is scalable and that's consistent and that offers all of our stakeholders a really rich and useful experience. We hope that for city staff and faculty, a lot of times people who are involved in community engaged learning don't get acknowledged for it. It's work that you do that nobody really knows about. And it's not usually technically part of what you're paid for. It's stuff that you do on the side. And so we're also trying to really acknowledge the faculty and the city staff who are doing this important work that's having significant and meaningful impact across our community that as citizens of London, we're all benefiting from. So we also, while we want to support the students and give platform for the students, we also are giving platform to the faculty and the city staff to also promote the work that they're doing and be acknowledged for that work. Has anybody participated in community engagement? Oh yeah, we've got a question there from Gus.
Yeah, Misha, thank you. The information has been fantastic. I just have a quick question. This is my first time participating in this type of project. And I was wondering if in order to participate, is it required to obtain a review or approval from an ethics research board in case you are including human participants?
Thanks, Gus. That's a great question. I'm glad you reminded us about that. Yeah, so many of the projects, let's say 10% of the projects have played with the concept around ethics. And I would say there's not a sort of clear answer on that. We are learning about that as we go. It depends on what the research is being used for. So we've found that in certain cases, most of the city research or the types of things that we're doing with the city is not, it's not academic published research. It's really research that's testing how things are working. It's feedback about what could be improved in the program. And so often that doesn't require research ethics from what we've understood currently. But we're really working with each of our academic partners to understand and to build the relationships with the ethics office to also make that process streamlined. So sometimes we have gone through the research ethics process and sometimes it's turned around within a few days. It's when we're very clear about what we're doing and we're able to move through that quickly. And then some of the projects have required more lengthy ethics approval process. And so that comes in handy, especially if it is a full year course, because then we can get that going right at the beginning of in September, and then have that approval in place by the time that might happen in the second semester while the students are doing all the background research through the fall. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, question about deadlines to apply. So ideally, we would like to have all the applications in by the end of April so that we can work on the matching process. We put forward the compatible matches and then we work through that process. Usually we're pretty good at matching, but sometimes for different reasons, the matches don't work, something changes. Last year, especially with COVID, we had just lots of changes where classes got canceled or city staff got deployed to other service areas and we had to cancel projects. So yeah, we're trying to have all the applications in by the end of April. And it is, that is for the matching process. So it's in your interest to get your application in by the end of April so that you're part of our initial matching process, because then you're part of the bigger pool of projects. And the sort of caveat to that is that it is a rolling application, and that we take applications at any time throughout the year. So we leave the application live all the time, and we just continue to watch that and build those relationships. Sometimes it might take a year or two for a project to kind of come into its fruition for different reasons. So we're always open to having those conversations and learning about your courses or learning about your projects and seeing where there might be overlap.
Misha, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So the way that we are trying to see this here at King's is we have two courses that we think would fit really well. But one of them, ideally, because it would be second and third year students, we would perhaps hope to have access to older data sets from you. And then the fourth year course would be a capstone project course. Could that work? We have access to previous data sets, and then the students get to play around and understand how it works and the types of projects you have. And then when they go into the fourth year, like they have a truer experience.
Yes, and I'm glad that you mentioned the data sets piece, because I didn't speak to that. And so the city, this year we did a number of projects with Environics, a kind of data set from the city. And so we were able to have the students go into the city's account and pull data, all of the data that the city has access to through that platform, which was pretty robust data. And we saw some really cool things. If you check out the winning project from December, which was looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions through installing air source heat pumps on single family homes. If you look at that project, there's about an hour presentation of the students. And when I went to that presentation, I was thinking it was going to be 15 minutes, and it just kept going and going and going. And the students had so much data in the project because they had gone into the Environics data and pulled economic data, geographic data, and behavioral data, where they were actually able to say that certain neighborhoods in the city were more likely to invest in this particular intervention. Some really cool stuff. So I will just add the caveat of that is that the city pays for those data licenses, and we don't control that. And so we don't control whether or not they renew those licenses. So that's sort of currently a data set that we had access to. And we don't know what they'll be renewing from one year to the next. But I think we made a pretty compelling case through that project that that data set was worth continuing to invest in.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Well, just a quick one, going back to the timelines. I'm very interested, but in my faculty, the confirmation to teach a course comes pretty late in the term, sometimes late April. So I am not certain I will be teaching that course that would be an ideal fit for this until late April or a few weeks after that. Would that have an impact in my application?
I would put your application in, and then just in that bottom section where you can write a comment, just flag that for us. So just say that that you won't have confirmation that the course is running until mid-April or something, and we'll keep that in mind. There's sort of a lot of moving parts like that. The logistics piece of the matching is a big part of it. So we do track all of that information when we're matching.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions coming to mind? I think I mentioned this, but maybe it's worth repeating that I didn't quite mention this. So CityStudio, it does not sit in the university, and it doesn't sit in the City Hall or at the City of London. We're at Pillar Nonprofit, kind of in the middle. So just to sort of frame that these aren't they are projects that come from the city strategic plan, but they're not real projects in the sense that the city council has not approved budget towards the particular project. The city staff themselves may have budget that they manage around different things that they are doing. And so there may be an implication that if the project helps the city staff move something forward or make something clear for them of what they want to do. For example, we had a project that was looking at sort of a communications plan for the planning department. And the students were proposing that the city staff person put advertisements on buses. And so the city staff person has budget that they manage, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to spend that budget the way that the students have recommended. But the fact that the students are recommending it is still interesting to the city staff person around how they make the choices that they're making with their budget. So it is important, though, that we frame that kind of appropriately, that they're not projects that are necessarily going to be carried out in a direct way. They can be carried out in sort of indirect ways where, you know, we're running different surveys, like that is a real project that's happening. We're doing different interventions where, you know, one of Jacob's classes was looking at putting forward some planning visualizations for a city block at, is it Wellington and Horton, across from the Goodwill building. And those drawings could be, like those graphic rendering visualizations could be used by the city in different conversations that they're having, but it doesn't mean that the city is going to then go and build that plan. Obviously that plan would have to go through all of the different approvals processes that are, you know, significantly robust. But yeah, so to just sort of frame that. And I would say that CityStudio, and you can read on our website sort of what our theory of change is in our manifesto. We're hoping that you know, we're aiming to sort of build rich relationships. That's sort of the main activity that we're doing, is building relationships, because we believe that by building these relationships, and in this case, we're building relationships between academic expertise and technical expertise towards making solutions for the city, that we're going to make our city more livable, joyful, and sustainable. And so we think that by working, or we hope that by working in this way, we might challenge or offer opportunities for the city to think about the way that the city is working and tackling different challenges that the city is responsible for. And likewise, on campus, we're also challenging sort of the academic sector to sort of reflect about what are different ways for learning and having these types of really rich learning experiences for students and for future professionals. So that's been pretty amazing to get to, you know, even the fact that we treat the students like professionals. We treat them like colleagues, like we meet them as equals, and we guide them and offer insights that we have about our experiences. But for example, last week we met with a team of students that's going out to do information interviews around social housing in London, and they've reached out to senior leaders in social housing across the city, and they've set up their information interviews. And we had a meeting with them just to help frame, build their confidence in the fact that they're totally ready to have those conversations. They're experts based on the research that they've done this semester, and then help guide them around what to expect in that situation to set them up for success.
And just to hop in about this networking piece that Misha is speaking to, from a student perspective, I went back to school. I was a mature student when I participated in the CityStudio projects that I did. And I really enjoyed being able to meet different faculty from different schools, as well as different members from different city departments. And regardless if they weren't directly related to the urban planning department or they were working on something else, it was great to just network and get to understand the different mechanisms involved in making city projects work, even though they were conceptual, just to get to speak with people and chat about the opportunities outside of academia was incredibly enriching for me, as well as other peers that I spoke to about it. And yeah, it was an amazing experience just to jump in from that student perspective.
Thanks, Jacob. And Jamie, was kind of from your experience this semester with over 20 projects running, was there anything that you wanted to share with the group?
I would just say that we have all sorts of projects running from different faculties, departments with different city staff at different sizes. So it's incredible how flexible this model can be. And as Misha was saying, sometimes it's a lot for students on the first in the first class to take it all in. And this is my first semester working with CityStudio, so it has been quite a journey to see how students take in this information, understand how partnerships work, and then ask really interesting questions and then develop in their projects. We've had an example of something that's fun to see students to come up with a new idea is a course. It's a course on talking about how city processes work. And one of our city staff brought forward a question about how do we increase recycling in parks. And I thought it was so great when I came to the midterm session to see how the students approached this idea. So they had an interesting approach where they took the question of how can we increase recycling in parks, and they kind of pulled it apart a bit and then took a step back and saw that it's actually a bigger part of an ecosystem and how the city functions. So instead of presenting how to only increase recycling in parks, they said, what if we just took away garbage collection in parks? What would that mean? And they thought about this as an ecosystem approach because they said, how can we actually inform people to manage their own garbage, but also how can we decrease costs for the city? And how can we actually make a better strategic plan for the city to manage garbage? So I would say you'll be surprised what the students come up with. So they'll be challenged and they'll come up with innovative ideas and innovative ways of looking at these experiments that they're brought forward. So I'm just having a great time seeing how students interpret these city problems or projects or experiments, and then really turning around and thinking about what they're learning in their class and making broader connections. So I really encourage you to think about that and think about how your students might interpret a question from the city. And same thing on the city side, be prepared for all sorts of interesting interpretations of the projects and what's possible.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Jacob. Any other questions that are coming to mind for anybody? Your questions are super useful because it's helping us bring forward stuff that we forgot. So you're definitely actively part of this workshop. I appreciate it. Okay, well, if we can also kind of sign off and let people get on with their days and just really appreciate the time that you've taken to learn about CityStudio, and hopefully we look forward to getting to know you better and getting to know what you're working on and what kind of support you might need, and what kind of offerings you might want to put forward as well. So please be in touch, even if you don't have a project idea and you just want to be a part of our network and you want to kind of make sure that you're getting invitations to Hubbub and all this stuff, feel free to fill out the application and just leave us a note there too. That gets you into all of our kind of contact lists. Also, if you know of anybody else who you think might be interested in this, please pass along any information that you've heard today. And just as a reminder, we'll post this information, this video on our YouTube channel if we manage to have recorded this properly, so that you can share that out as well. And we really appreciate you doing so. Also check out our social media accounts and follow there, just so that you can keep track of like what's happening with the projects. And there we also post the reminders about the events that are happening throughout the year and the application. And regardless of whatever form the next conversation takes, we're really grateful to meet you and to know that you're in our community and that you're wanting to do this kind of work and that you care about our city and our students and our our community. So we're really happy to meet you and grateful to spend the time together today. And we look forward to the next conversation. So thank you all very much.